Nitsana, we are very happy to have you in Mexico.
It's my pleasure.
It's an honor.
Yeah.
And we would like to ask you, what is the project you are working on now?
As we all know, Hezbollah is working on the border in Lebanon, trying to intrigue and to bring Israel into a war against them. Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran, and Iran wants to destroy Israel, and they feel that this is the right time to do that. So we are preparing to the next war against Hezbollah, which will be the third Lebanese war. And according to the security services assessment, in the first day of the war, Hezbollah has capabilities to shoot 1,500 missiles towards Israel. These will be accurate missiles, long-range missiles that will hit Tel Aviv, will hit Ben Gurion Airport, and will cause thousands, yes, in Jerusalem, thousands or 10,000 of casualties in the Israeli side. The IDF will have to retaliate, and they will retaliate against the missiles and the launchers in the Lebanese side, which are hidden among civilians. As we all know, Hezbollah is using the population in South Lebanon as human shields, and they take the launcher, they take the missiles, they hide them among their houses, among their schools, inside their hospitals, their kindergartens, inside the mosques. So when the IDF retaliate, and they will hit the launchers and the missiles where these people live, there will be a lot of casualties in the Lebanese side. And then the scenario is very clear, because as long as there are casualties on the Israeli side, the world keeps silence. But once a Lebanese civilian will get hurt, then there will be a pressure by the international community against Israel to stop the war, or to indict IDF soldiers for war crimes. Or they will tell Israel, if you want to continue the war, you have to stop the artillery and do ground invasion, meaning soldiers' life will be lost. So our goal now, before the war starts, is to raise this issue, is to do anything we can in order to prevent the pressure from the international community that will allow the IDF to fight against Hezbollah when the war starts, to finish the war. The IDF plans that this will be the last war. Remember, we are talking about 150,000 missiles that are hidden among civilians in South Lebanon. Hezbollah can utilize these missiles, and that can create a catastrophe in Israel. So the IDF's plan is really to clear up South Lebanon, and it will cause a lot of casualties on the Lebanese side. So if the world cares, and if the international community really cares about the Lebanese people, they have to act now. We are going to alert them to the situation. Not that they don't know, but we are going to document this. In law, we call it serving notice. We're going to serve notice to the European Union, to the International Criminal Court, to the Vatican, to the UN, to all the international human rights organizations, letting them know that there is a danger right now going on in South Lebanon, that the people in South Lebanon are sitting ducks, that they might get killed when the war starts. And if they want to save their life, the time to act is now, is to put pressure on Hezbollah, to put pressure on the Lebanese government, which claim that they are neutral and they don't do anything, they're not involved. Put pressure on them to clear the area, because Israel has a right to defend itself, and the price will be very heavy on the Lebanese side. The time to act is now. Otherwise, don't come to Israel with demand when the war starts. And to do that, we are going to launch a legal campaign and a public campaign to let the entire world know what's going to happen.
Like in the American newspapers and
Definitely.
everywhere.
Yes, everywhere. In Europe, in the United States, in Mexico. One of the reasons we are here in Mexico now is to get partners and get allies to work with us on this issue. We're going to work with the Christian community, with the evangelist community. It's an interest of the Jews and the Christians all together to make sure that Israel will survive the next war.
There is a danger that it won't survive?
It's a very big danger that Israel is facing in the next war. Look, one missile, it's not going to be the rockets that Hamas is shooting against us in Gaza. It's going to be a real missile that has long range and has an accurate mechanism in it. Meaning if they want to hit a building in Tel Aviv, let's say 40 or 50 floors up, they can hit the building. Now you tell me how many people will get killed once this building will collapse. And this is one missile. We know that Hezbollah has the way to shoot up to 1,500 missiles in the first day.
And there is no way Israel can prepare, like.
So Israel may take a preemptive act, right? But then Israel is the one that starts the war. Israel the one that will hit the civilians in South Lebanon, which will create even bigger pressure from the international community. So we want to be prepared to these all scenarios, whether Hezbollah hits first or Israel hits first. We want to let Israel defend itself, let the IDF have an open and free way to protect us.
Okay. What does it mean for Israel, the new UN blacklist? Because are you taking action against it?
You know, one of the most anti-Semitic organizations in the world is the UN, but on top of it is the UN Human Rights Council. It's led by all the countries that really safeguard human rights, like Saudi Arabia, like China, like Russia. But all they care is Israel. When they gather, when they have a conference every year, they condemn only one country, Israel. So today, they came up with a blacklist. It's a project that they've been working on for 5 years under the pressure of the BDS movement, to come and list all the companies that are working in the Judea and Samaria areas, in East Jerusalem, in the Golan Heights, what they consider to be occupied territories. And to come and tell the entire world, these companies are working on occupied territories, they violate international law, you should not do business with them, you should boycott them. This decision that they came up with lists 112 companies, 94 of them are Israelis, 18 are international, and so far it doesn't have any legal enforcement. They cannot force or obligate any company to boycott these companies. However, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing because it really colors these companies as so-called human rights violators, and there is a fear that countries will not do businesses with these companies, that other companies will boycott these companies on this list, and therefore we have to fight back. You can't fight back until someone really boycotts these companies. So we in HaDin are preparing lawsuits the same way we did with Airbnb, that once any company will decide to boycott these 112 companies on the list, we'll be able to take action against them. And believe me, there is not a lack of laws that these companies may violate. Every country has anti-discrimination laws based on religion, based on nationality, that we can take. Airbnb, when they boycott Jewish businesses and corporations, Jewish houses in Judea and Samaria, they violate the fair housing law in the United States that obligates everyone to act fairly and equally when they come to housing and to residential environment. So there are laws that these companies will violate, and we are preparing lawsuits against them. I hope that none of these companies will really be boycotted, but as we see things now, it's a really scary situation. They should not have done it, the Human Rights Council. If they wanted to do it because these companies are working on occupied territories, why they didn't do it against other occupied territories around the world, like Northern Cyprus, like Western Sahara, like Georgia, which is occupied by Russia. why they singled out Israel, why to go after these companies in these territories. As I said before, it's simply anti-Semitism. As an organization that fights anti-Semitism, we're prepared to fight them back.
And which takes us to the subject of anti-Israel and anti-Semitism. In many places they say this is anti-Israel policy, it's not anti-Semitic, like in Spain, like in many places. We are only against Israel, we are not against the Jews, but Israel is a Jewish state.
Absolutely.
So what do you think about it?
Absolutely, because the BDS movement, the one that called to boycott Israel, when they come and say we just want to boycott Israel, the real goal is to single out Israel. The real goal is to isolate Israel. And what they're trying to achieve is, if you look at their website, if you hear their speeches, if you listen very carefully, they want to exchange the state of Israel with a Palestinian state. Mark my words, they don't encourage two-state solution. They want one-state solution, a Palestinian state. And they draw the way very clearly. They say, let's have all the refugees from 1948 that ran away from Israel. There were 600,000 of them back then. Today there are 5 million. To come back to Israel, to settle in it, under the slogan, let demography win. They don't believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, and therefore they want to put pressure on Israel by boycotting it, by sanctioning it, by divest from it, to let the Palestinian refugees come back. And then there will be no more Jewish state. So you can't really distinguish and say, no, the BDS is actually anti-Israeli movement, but not anti-Semitic, because they are anti-Jews. They don't want Israel to be a Jewish state. This is why it's purely anti-Semitism.
So you think there is no a line between anti-Semitism and anti-Israel?
There is no difference.
Anti-Zionism.
There is no difference. No. Look, when Airbnb boycotts the Jewish homes, they only boycott Jewish homes. They didn't boycott Palestinian homes. They didn't boycott Muslims' homes or Christians' homes. Just Jewish homes. So you tell me, is this anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic act? Today you can't differ between the two.
Which take us to Airbnb, the case.
Airbnb is a very nice victory that we won in the beginning of the year. That was a case where Airbnb decided that they are going to delist Jewish homes in Judea and Samaria because they no longer want to work in occupied territories. They don't want their website to list homes in occupied territories. But as I said before, they didn't delist Christians or Muslims or Palestinians' homes.
How did you win this case?
They came to us to settle the case.
They came to you?
Yes, we filed a lawsuit against Airbnb in Delaware, where they're incorporated, using the fair housing law, which tells you that when you want to rent a house or you want to sell a house, or when you're dealing with housing, you have to deal with equally, not to discriminate. And this is a discrimination based on religion. They discriminate against Jews, only Jews. So we brought the lawsuit on behalf of 12 owners of Jewish homes. And after 3 months, Airbnb came to us and asked to settle the case out of court. We reached an agreement, and Airbnb took upon itself to backtrack from its policy and no longer to boycott Jewish homes. It was a great defeat to the BDS movement.
Are you taking part of the legal defense or arguments of Israel against the intention of the International Criminal Court launching an investigation over alleged war crimes?
Right. So in 2012, the Palestinian Authority upgraded their status to an observer state in order to be able to sign the Rome Treaty and to become a member in the International Criminal Court. They knew back then that a day will come and they would want to indict Israel for war crimes. And they have two allegations. One is that the IDF soldiers are using excessive force against Palestinians in their different operations. And the other issue is the issue of the settlements. They come and say that moving population to live in occupied territories is a violation of the international law. And they have been working with a chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for at least 6 years until she finally came with a decision and saying yes. She believes that there is a war crime committed by Israel, and she wants to investigate IDF soldiers for using excessive force. She wants to investigate the project of the settlements. She wants to indict Israel for war crimes. And this is a devastating decision, because if she goes about it, and Israel will not cooperate because Israel is not a member in the International Criminal Court, Israel will not send over soldiers or officers or officials to be interrogated by the court. So the court will issue arrest warrants against these soldiers, and these soldiers will be prevented from going to any country in Europe, because all the countries in Europe are members in the International Criminal Court. El Al may not be able to fly to these countries. Israel will be under sanctions. It will be boycotted until they collapse to the pressure of the International Criminal Court. So if she decides that there is a basis for investigation, it will be a game changer.
Are you going to participate to the legal defense of Israel?
100%. Israel cannot formally participate in these proceedings because they are not members of the court. They will not become members of the court. They don't believe the court is fair. It's totally a biased court, and therefore they are not coming formally into the court. However, they don't want to leave the court open just to the Palestinians. They have to present the other side. So here come NGOs like us, like Shurat, HaDin, to come and present the Israeli side. And we have a lot of arguments to raise before the court. First and foremost, that the Palestinian Authority is not a state. They are not a state. They cannot become members in the court. They may call themselves an observer state, but they are not a sovereign state. They don't control an area. In order to become a state, you have to have defined borders. The Palestinian Authority doesn't have defined borders. I'm asking you, is Jerusalem in the Palestinian Authority or not? Gaza is in the Palestinian Authority or not? Tulkarem, Nablus, who knows where the borders go? Nobody agreed on it yet. So it can be a state. Also, they have to govern on a territorial, which is a full. And here you have Gaza, here you have Judea and Samaria here. That's not a state. To make a long story short, there are a lot of arguments why the Palestinian Authority cannot be a state and should not become members in the court, and therefore the court has no jurisdiction because Israel is not a member. But even if they do want to go into this issue, Israel should be blamed for committing war crimes. Israel will be the war criminal among the parties. The Palestinians launched an intifada against Israel for 20 years. They sent suicide bombers to kill hundreds of people. Buses got blown up, ambushes, drive-by shootings. Thousands of missiles the Palestinians shoot towards civilians in Israel. That's not a war crime? No, it's not a war crime. It's an international crime. It's called genocide. So between Israel to the Palestinians, the one that should be stand on trial in the International Criminal Court is the Palestinian Authority's leaders, is the leaders of Hamas and Fatah and these terror organizations. So we brought complaints against the leaders of Fatah, of Hamas, of Islamic Jihad, against the Palestinian Authority's heads in front of the court. And we are not counting on the fact that the Palestinian Authority is a member of the court because, as we said before, they are not members. The leaders of Hamas and Fatah have Jordanian citizenship. And Jordan is a member of the court from day one. Therefore, if the court really wants to get into this issue, they have the jurisdiction to go after the Jordanian people, the heads of Hamas, Fatah, and the Islamic Jihad, but not against Israel.
Which one would you say is your best victory ever?
We had a couple of victories. One is a judgment that we received in the federal court in New York in a jury trial against the Palestinian Authority. The jury granted us a judgment for $655 million against the Palestinian Authority. That was an amazing victory because you're sitting before 12 New Yorkers that have to sit and listen to the evidence and to understand what is going on in the Middle East, how the Palestinians fight the Israelis, what exactly Yasser Arafat was telling his soldiers, his workers, how he directed the Intifada, what he pretended he was doing, whereas on the other hand, he was doing the opposite. All very complicated evidence, and they sat there and they listened to the stories and they listened to the evidence and the expert reports and were convinced. And I tell you what convinced them, most of them all the attacks that were brought into this trial were done by Palestinian employees, Palestinian policemen, Palestinian security guards, officials of the PLO, people that work in the Palestinian Authority and get their salary from the Palestinian Authority. So when the trial opened, the Palestinian Authority came and said, "You're right, indeed they were our employees, but they were rogue employees. They did the attacks after work hours. It wasn't our policy to kill Israelis. We didn't encourage them to go and kill Jews." But then they had a problem to explain. If these were rogue employees, how do you keep paying their salary until today? The prisoners who are sitting in the Israeli jail received a payment from the Palestinian Authority on a monthly basis based on what they did. The families of the suicide bombers that got killed in the attacks received stipends from the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority calls town squares and soccer games on the name of the terrorists. This is not how you treat rogue employees. This is not when your policy is against killing Jews. And the jury got convinced and gave us a judgment. That was a huge victory. And recently, a couple of months ago, we won a similar judgment in the Israeli court, again against the Palestinian Authority. It was like a lot of terror attacks, all came before the court, and after 20 years, the court came down with a decision, historic decision, finding the Palestinian Authority responsible for lots of the terror attacks during the Intifada. Not only the ones that were done by Palestinian employees, but the ones that were done by Hamas, by Islamic Jihad, by PLO. All these terror attacks that all the different terror organizations committed, the Palestinian Authority was found liable for them.
Wonderful. And now, how does a nice Jewish Orthodox wife and mother like you go to the courts, international courts, American courts, all kinds of courts to fight terrorism? And terrorists, no?
Terrorists, yeah, and their lawyers,
It's a dangerous job, no?
You touch upon a very interesting point because I'm admitted to work in Israel only. I'm an Israeli lawyer. When I want to file a case in the United States or elsewhere, I need to get co-counsels to work with me. And a lot of lawyers that I approach to work with me say that they are afraid. Or
you're not afraid?
Or their wives don't let them, or their insurance company doesn't cover it. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid because I live in Israel, and I want to make sure that we Israelis will live in Israel safely. We want to shop in our malls, we want to visit our cafes, we want to walk freely in our streets. You don't want to be scared, you don't want to be frightened, we don't want to be killed. And therefore, we have to do anything we can in order to take part in the war against terrorism. And we as lawyers doing what lawyers do best, go after the pocketbooks of the terror organizations, because money is the oxygen to the terrorism. And if you block the flow of the money, you can block the flow of the terrorism. It's a task that nobody else took before, nobody else is doing in this scale, and Shurat will continue to fight the terrorism. We want to bankrupt terrorism one lawsuit at a time.
How did it occur to you?
Look, we were living in Israel when the Intifada broke out, the year of 2000. And we saw it coming. When I say it saw it coming, it's we were living there in the first Intifada, when the buses were blown up on the streets and people were getting killed on a daily basis. And in September 2000, when the second Intifada broke out, we knew exactly what's going to happen. We knew that we are going to experience dead people on a daily basis. We're going to see in the news, on the TV, we're going to hear it in the radio, terror attack one after another, grievedness, frightness, and we had to fight it back. So we said, they're not going to kill us. The Palestinians are not going to destroy us. They may hurt us physically, but they are not going to break our spirit. And we got up to set up an example to the people in Israel how they have to get up and fight back, how the victims from all people can fight back. How can they become no victims anymore? And they agreed with us and they joined us, and we were able to get them a measure of justice and to fight those who devastated their life. We took the money from the people who destroyed the country and gave it to the one who deserved it most, the terror victims. We were able to freeze accounts of terrorists. We were able to block funding of terrorists. We were able to go after assets and bank accounts that belong to terror entities. We were able to achieve $2 billion in judgments and to collect more than $300 million that went to the terror victims. And we continue doing it because in the end, every person in Israel has to fight for the survival of Israel. It will be a fight. It will be a fight. We know it will be a very long way, but in the end, we are going to win because we are fighting for our national survival.
And what does the victim tell you? The victims tell you?
The victims, when they win a case, listen, no money can bring back life. But it gives them a measure of closure. They know that the one that is responsible for their disaster, for their sacrifice, now is paying the price. So they come and say, thank you. Thank you for letting them fight back. Thank you for getting their integrity back. They feel they are no longer victims.
Which one of the families of the victim you remember now that came to you and it was like when you said it's worth it?
Yeah. It was actually was in a case of a young girl. Her name was Ella Bukassis. She was 17 years old. Ella. Uh-huh. And she was walking with her brother, 15 years old, one day in Sderot when the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the missiles are falling from Gaza. So in Tel Aviv, you have 90 seconds to find a shelter. In Ashdod, which is a little bit southern than Tel Aviv, you have 60 seconds to find a shelter. In Sderot, you have 15 seconds to find a shelter. So she was walking down the street. It was a bare street. There was no building, no bus stop to hide underneath them. The only thing that went into her mind is to protect her brother. She fell over her brother, she covered him. The missile fell right near their heads. Many shrapnels went through their both heads. She fought for 7 days on her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We were asked if we can file a lawsuit against a major bank that provided financial services to Hamas at the time. We agreed. We filed the case in the federal court in New York and we won. So the father of Ella Abukassis called me up and he said, "Thank you for letting me fight back. Thank you for getting me my integrity back. I feel I'm no longer a victim."
Wow. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Here in Mexico, we have been having a really hard time with Roger Waters' message of hatred. He's chosen our country to come every year to the point that people even laugh that he should start paying taxes here because he's around a lot. And he has found a lot of echo here, and it's getting really scary. And there's no legal way for us to stop him. There was once there was a little hint of we could have done it when he started speaking about the president, and he's not allowed to do that as a foreigner in Mexico. But with the new party, he's for this party. He's going to be allowed to do whatever he wants and come back as many times as he wants. We got into the point we're desperate, and I just have been trying. I cannot stop him from coming or speaking or whatever, so I'm just trying to contrarrest his message, letting people know he's a liar, he promotes hatred, whatever, don't listen to him. That's all we have been able to do. Is there anything like big time legal we can do to stop him, is it unlawful in the world to talk to promote hatred?
Yeah. Look, this is the problem with the BDS movement, that they are using very sneaky, sophisticated ways. Yeah, they utilize freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Israel is the only country who really can fight back, along with the United States. But in order to do that, you need to legislate special laws that allow you to fight back. Like Israel legislated a law that bans BDS activists from entering Israel. And this is a good thing. Like if you're a BDS activist, like Roger Waters will never step foot in Israel because he will not be allowed to. Israel has another law that imposes third-party liability on someone who called to boycott Israel, and as a result of his call, a harm occurred. So you can really sue someone who called to boycott Israel. United States also have anti-BDS laws. A BDS company or a company that boycotts Israel cannot do business with the government or any authority. So they cannot get funding, they cannot get permits, they cannot be associated with the government in the state. This weakens the ability of the BDS company to work and to enhance and to develop in these countries. Or recently, President Trump signed up on an executive order saying that you are not allowed to promote BDS in universities. That is like it's a sort of anti-Semitism. If you do that, you won't get funding from the American administration. Because if you don't have the legislator rules, you can't really fight the BDS. You can utilize more general laws like anti-discrimination law. Like every democratic state or every westernized country has laws that prohibits discrimination. Discrimination based on religion, on gender, based on color, based on nationality, right? But I'm not sure what the situation here in Mexico. It's not a legal fight. Then it turns just to a public fight. fight on the public opinion. And then it's much harder because you have to go and convince the people in Mexico that what Roger Waters says is a lie, and it's not truthful, and they should not believe what he says. But this is a really big undertaking, which I'm not sure, organization can do, or even a state can do. You can't influence public opinion by just convincing them to feel different.